So chapter 10, the political economy of trade policy. This chapter consists of 5 sections. Section 1, the cases for free trade. This means that why free trade policy is better than restricted trade policy or protectionist policy. That is section number 1. Section number 2, the cases against free trade policy. Section 2 explains the reason why protectionist policy better than free trade policy, the opposite of section 1. Okay? And section 3, political models of trade policy. Political models of trade policy. Here we introduce medium voter theorem and collective action. Okay? The main purpose of this section is to explain why protectionist policy is more popular than free trade policy. Okay? So medium voter theorem's implication of medium voter theorem is that free trade policy should be adopted than protectionist policy. But in real world, that is not true. Right? So usually protectionist policy is likely to be adopted than free trade policy. This one explained in using the concept of collective action problem. Okay? And section 4, the international negotiations of trade policy and WTO. Right? So in this chapter, we study multilateral liberalization process. Okay? And section 5 is FTA or PTA, right? So that means regional integration, regional trade, that kind of things. So multilateral liberalization process is different from preferential trade agreement, right? That kind of thing. It's explained in section 5. Oh, okay, now we go section 1. The cases for free trade. Why free trade? Why free trade better than restricted trade or protectionist policy? The first case for free trade is arguments that producers and consumers allocate resources. Resources means factors, right? Most efficiently when governments do not distort market price through trade policy. Okay? So in simply talking, we can say efficient allocation of factors or resources, right? That is number 1 argument. So only free trade guarantee efficient allocation of factors. Government enter the market, then what happened? Market distorted and inefficiency increase, right? Think about consumer surplus and producer surplus and national welfare. Simply talking, national welfare decrease when governments enter the market, intervene at the market, right? And national welfare maximized only when free trade policy adopted. Okay? National welfare of a small country is highest with free trade. With restricted trade, consumers pay higher price and consume too little. Why? Firm produce too much. Right? We already studied in chapter 9, for example, tariff case. Right? Then what happened? Consumer surplus decrease. After imposition of tariff, domestic price increase. So consumers pay higher price. Right? And inefficient produce too much. Okay? That is number 1 reason. So figure 10.1, the efficiency case for free trade. A trade restriction such as tariff leads to production and consumption distortion, right? We know deadweight loss when government introduce tariff, impose tariff, right? Inefficient produce too much. That is production distortion in figure 10.1. And consumers consume too little compared to free trade outcome, right? That happened. And slide number 6. However, because tariff rates are already very low for most countries, the estimated benefit of moving to free trade are only a small fraction of national income for most countries. Okay? That is number one reason. But after Second World War, right, lots of some multilateral liberalization happened. In other words, tariff rate decreased and decreased after Second World War. Now, remaining tariff is not large, very small. Okay? So more liberalization doesn't increase national welfare greatly or increase per capita GDP, right? A little. Okay? That is the main idea of this slide number 6. For the world as a whole, protection costs less than 1% of GDP because already liberalization proceeds sufficiently. Okay? The gains from free trade are somewhat smaller, especially for developed countries, advanced countries, such as United States and Europe, including Korea, for example. Right? Because already tariff rate is very low. Remaining tariff is not high. Right? But still, developing countries use lots of some tariff policy. Right? Tariff rate, remaining tariff in developing countries are very high, especially in manufacturing sector, for manufacturing and service sector, for example. So because of that, if liberalization happens, reduction in tariff happens, fully developing countries can enjoy larger benefit that develops economies. Okay? Okay, so look at slide number 7, table 10.1, benefit of moving to worldwide free trade. Remaining, so this is a simulation result that all the remaining tariffs of all the countries eliminated. Then what happened? Then United States GDP, right, increased by 0.57%. EU 0.61%, Japan 0.85%. Developing countries GDP increased by 1.4% because developing countries have a higher remaining tariff. Okay, so reduction in tariff increased GDP. World, right? All of the countries grow only 0.93%. Okay, that is a simulation, computable general equilibrium analysis. Okay, so source William Klein, Trade Policy and Global Poverty. Okay, so that is the result of a computable general equilibrium model. Actually, I'm doing same simulation. Okay, but the scenario of this one is reduction in remaining tariff in goods, manufacturing and agricultural sector. Then what happened? Then calculate it like this. Okay? That is assumption of this simulation. And second assumption of this simulation is just measure static gains. Static gain. You know what's the meaning of static gain? Actually, that is static gain. Static gains. Right? Static gain. So, total capital stock, constant. Total labor employment, labor supply, constant. Technology level, constant. Then what happened? When remaining tariff eliminated. That is static result, static analysis result. Okay? But different terminology of static gain is dynamic gains. Trade liberalization happen, then some countries can enjoy economies of scale or productivity increase, right? Then the result of same simulation different compared to static gains. Actually, we said that is dynamic gains. Dynamic gains are greater than usually static gain, right? So look, in this dynamic analysis, capital can increase, for example. Capital stock can increase, okay? And technology can change, right? Then, but static gain only captures some efficient allocation of constant labor, capital, and technology. Okay, quite different. So, should be careful for interpreting table 10.1. And slide number 8. Free trade allows firms or industry to take advantage of economies of scale. Second reason why free trade better than restricted trade is scale economies. Economies of scale. Economies of scale. Right? Economies of scale. We already studied the concept of economies of scale, right? So firm's production increase, then average cost decrease, right? This. So that is a sort of technological change or productivity growth. So that is dynamic gains actually, right? Sometimes this one is very critical impact of liberalization. For example, look at this. Protected market limits gains from external economies of scale by inhibiting the concentration of industries. Right? Too many firms to enter the protected industries. The scale of production of each firm becomes inefficient. But after free trade policy, right? So protection is not valid anymore. Then each firm's production increase, size of firm increase, then can produce same good with cheaper cost than before, right? That is really important one. Okay, so if protection occurs, for example, in Korea, too many firms, right? For example, what is a good example for this? Too many firms, right? For example, think about bakery industry in Korea, right? There are because 골목상권법 of Korean government's policy, there are too many bakeries and something, right? So one bakery shop's production is very small, okay? So produce same good with higher cost, right? But if this kind of 골목상권법, for example, is repeated, then what happens? So large size bakery occupy most of the market. Okay? Then size of some production increase and production cost decrease and price of some goods decrease greatly. That is a story of scale economies, internal or external. Okay? So anyway, free trade means small company. Some small company in Korea cannot be survived after competition with imported goods. Right? They disappear, simply talking. But some firms in Korea, very efficient, then this kind of firms can sell their products to world market. Before liberalization, this was only sold in domestic territory. But after liberalization, they can sell their efficient products at world market. Now think about the success of Psy or BTS. They can sell their services to world market, right? That kind of thing happened. That is the story of economies of scale, right? Only free trade policy guarantee economies of scale. Restricted trade cannot guarantee economies of scale. Okay, that is number 2 reason. And number 3 is free trade provides competition and opportunities for innovation. Number 3, competition and opportunity for innovation. Innovation is possible, right? So after free trade, what happened? companies have to compete with foreign companies, foreign imports. Okay? So to survive at the market, companies doing best, right? Under the pressure of competition. Okay? In this situation, firms' efficiency increase, right? Or technology level increase. Can you understand? And same thing happens. Opportunity for innovation. So if protection situation, companies have no incentive to innovate or compete with other companies, foreign companies, right? No incentive for innovation. No incentive to down the cost, production cost at all. But free trade case, domestic company have to do their best to survive from the foreign competitors, right? In this way, innovation happen, right? So actually, that is a really important thing. So very similar story of economy of scale, competition and opportunity for innovation, right? Anyway, so firms is not so happy after liberalization, right? But the important thing is the result. Result is increasing productivity based on competition with foreign companies. Can you understand? So same thing happened in this international trade class. If we don't allow competition between students, right? Then what happens? Students have no incentive to study at all, right? So because we have lots of exams to test students' capability in relative system. So this semester is absolute system anyway, right? So students do your best. Students do their best to get higher mark. In this way, students, some understanding on international trade increase and increase. That is the result, right? Result is beautiful, but process is really terrible, isn't it? Okay? So important thing is the result. Anyway, because of this, national welfare increase, national per capita GDP increase after free trade. By providing entrepreneurs with an incentive to seek new ways to export or compete with imports, free trade offers more opportunity for learning and innovation. Actually, Korean companies, right, experience this kind of thing, right? Lots of Korean politicians blame large conglomerate of Korea, right? Sometimes that is true in some sense, but in other sense, they did their best to export their goods to world market or compete with foreign firms. In this way, we can produce more and we can consume more, and per capita GDP increase. Okay? And next slide. Free trade avoids the loss of resources, loss of factors through rent seeking. Right? Number 4 reason is avoidance of rent-seeking activity, rent-seeking behavior. We already studied the rent-seeking, right? In case of import quota or tariff, right? After imposition of tariff or import quota, then what happens? Domestic importers can some larger profit than otherwise, right? So they did every effort to prepare some protectionist policy. Under the system of protection policy, some groups can enjoy extra profit. Okay, so sometimes they bribe some public servant, right, to keep some protection policy like this, right? So spend time and other resources seeking quota rise and the profit that they will earn. That's rent-seeking behavior. But free trade, no reason to worry about this rent-seeking behavior at all, right? So free trade policy is better than protectionist policy. Okay? That is number 3 reason. Anyway, I said number 1 reason is static gain. Number 2 and 3 is dynamic gain. Number 4 also very similar to dynamic gains, right? So I'd like to explain rent-seeking more. Actually, rent-seeking behavior is very popular in developing countries. They don't care. Government don't care, right? So national welfare. For example, India imposed high tariff on imported goods. Then what happened? Right? Then some importers of foreign goods earns some extra profit. Okay, so they use some extra profit to bribe some public servant, for example. Right? Also, in developing countries, fiscal condition is not so good. Quite different from Korea and other developed countries. So main source of public revenue, fiscal revenue is collect tariff. So some governments like India, right, want protectionist policy. Okay? And so finally, why free trade better than restrict trade? That is political argument for political argument for free trade, right? That is number 5. The political argument for free trade says that free trade is the best feasible political policy. Best feasible political policy, even though sometimes there may be better policies in principle. Now think about in chapter 9, some large countries' national welfare can increase after imposition of tariff, right? In theoretical world, but in real world, right? Free trade is best feasible political economy, right? That is number 5. Any policy that deviates from free trade would be quickly manipulated by political groups, leading to decreased national welfare. Okay? So think about import quota case. So rent-seeking behavior happen. Okay? So quickly manipulated by political groups. Because of this, free trade policy is best feasible policy. Okay? Now we studied some why restricted trade better than free trade, right? There are some arguments for this. Number 1 is terms of trade gain. Number 1 is terms of trade gain. We already studied these terms of trade gain when large countries impose tariff. Right? Then sometimes terms of trade gain greater than deadweight loss. Right? For large country, a tariff lowers the price of imports in world market and generate terms of trade. This benefit may exceed the losses caused by distortion in production and consumption. A small tariff will lead to an increase in national welfare for large economy. But at some tariff rate, the national welfare will begin to decrease as the economic efficiency loss exceeds terms of trade gain. Actually, we studied this in chapter 9. Now, slide number 13 is some optimum tariff argument. Optimum tariff, right? Optimum tariff, right? Now, in this figure, x variable is tariff rate, right? So we moving here, tariff rate increase and increase. And y value is national welfare. Then we can see this kind of graph, right? So for large country, there is optimum tariff TO, at which the marginal gain from improved terms of Trade just equals the marginal efficiency loss from production and consumption distortion. Right? So figure 10 point, and it's like this, right? That is tariff rate. Tariff rate is equal to 0, and increase. And that is national welfare. Y variable is national welfare, right? Then what happens? Tariff rate increase. When large countries imposing tariff, increase its tariff, then national welfare can increase. And reaching at some maximum level at this point, we said that is optimum tariff, TO, right? And higher tariff more, then national welfare can decrease like this, right? After a certain level of tariff, we said prohibitive tariff rate, TP, then national welfare continues like this. That is figure 10.2, right? Anyway, now think about large economies. So introduce tariff, then what happens? Terms of tariff increase, then terms of trade gain increase. Okay? At the same time, consumer surplus, changing consumer surplus plus changing producer surplus. That is deadweight loss. This one decrease and decrease, right? So in this way, what happens? This one increase in terms of trade gain until reaching at optimum tariff. Increase in terms of trade gain greater than decrease in deadweight loss. And at this point, what happens? Magnitude of gains from increasing in terms of trade gain is equal to decrease in deadweight loss. After this, what happens? This one greater than decrease in deadweight loss greater than terms of trade gain. So national welfare decrease after this, right? At this point, no importation happen because of too high tariff, right? So no importation. So national welfare same like this, right? So for example, our tariff rate in 1990, for example, Japanese tariff on imported rice is, for example, 1,000% or 2,000% like this. That is prohibitive tariff, right? Increase more tariff, do not impact on the result at all. Because import rice is too high because of high tariff, and domestic consumers just consume domestically produced cultivated rice. Same thing happened in Korea. Now, maybe in Korea, this prohibitive tariff rate is 1,000% or 8,000%, for example, right? Or 4,000, lower than 8,000, higher than 4,000%. Then no rice imported. Okay? A tariff rate that completely prohibit imports leaves a country worse off. But tariff rate, TO, optimum tariff, may exist that maximize national welfare. That is an optimum tariff. For some large countries like the United States, that is not the case of Korea. That is a large country case, US, for example. An import tariff and or export tax could improve national welfare at the expense of other countries. Why? Terms of trade gain. Terms of trade gain happen at the expense of other countries, foreign countries, exporting countries, right? But this argument ignores the likelihood that other countries may retaliate against large countries by enacting their own trade restriction. In Chapter 9, we studied that home country impose high tariff on imported Q2, agricultural goods. Then partner countries can do same actions against home countries in Q1 market, manufacturing market, right? That is retaliation. So if we consider retaliation, this kind of optimum tariff story lacks some feasibility. Okay? And slide number 15 skipped. And we go next slide. Second argument, why restricted trade better than free trade? That is argument of market failures, right? When there exists market failure, market fails, then government can enter the market to increase some efficiency, isn't it? That is second. So government adopt protectionist policy to remedy some market failures in other goods. That is free trade. That is market failure story. A second argument against free trade is that domestic market failures may exist that cause free trade to be a suboptimal policy. The important word is suboptimal policy. Market fails in, for example, market A. But sometimes government introduce protectionist policy in market B, right? To increase national welfare. In that sense, suboptimal. The economic efficiency loss calculation using consumer and producer surplus assume that market function very well. But sometimes, especially in developing countries, we can find market failures, right? Recently, in the COVID-19 crisis, worldwide, right? So we can see lots of market failures in developing and developed countries, right? Number one types of market failure is this, persistently high underemployment of workers, right? That is number one reason. So labor supply greater than labor demand. So lots of unemployment happen, right? So plus that are not eliminated in the market for labor because wages do not adjust, especially for developing countries. Developing countries, wage rate is very low. In this very low wage rate, still labor supply greater than labor demand. Okay? So lots of unemployment problem happen. And number two reason is unemployment of capital stock. Number one type is unemployment of labor, right? Second one is unemployment of capital stock. Okay? Persistently high underutilization of structures, equipment, and other forms of capital. Okay? So this kind of thing is very popular in recession period, even in Korea, right? First and second oil shock happened in 1973 and 1979, and we can see the underutilization of capital stock, unemployment of capital stock, for example, right? So plus that are not eliminated in the market for capital because the price do not adjust. And number three is three type of market failure is property rights not well defined or well enforced, especially in developing countries. Then some firms in developed countries have no reason to produce or innovate some medicine or other things. Okay, so then market fails. Also, technological benefit for society is discovered through private production, but from which private firms cannot fully profit. For example, Samsung semiconductor companies produce new semiconductor after spending lots of R&D efforts, right? But this kind of thing cannot be fully captured by Samsung company firms. Other competitors or consumers can enjoy the benefit of technological some spending by some companies. That is a positive external economics case. Okay. Also, the opposite case is environmental cost for society caused by private production, but for which private firms do not fully pay. That is a negative external economics case. Okay? Firms contaminate lots of some pollution, but they didn't some pay for that. Then the other companies or consumers, right, some incur some loss because of this behavior, right? And number three, sellers that are not well informed about cost of production, or buyers that are not well informed about value from consumption. So in symmetric information story. Okay? Economists calculate the marginal social benefit to represent additional benefit to society from private production. With the market failures, marginal social benefit is not accurately measured by the produced surplus of private firms, so the economic efficiency loss calculations are misleading. Okay? So until now, benefit, think about benefit, marginal benefit, means private, some marginal benefit, marginal cost or marginal some utility. Right? Until now, we assume that this marginal utility or marginal cost equal to social marginal cost or marginal social benefit. But private benefit different from social benefit because of external economies or negative external economies. Okay? So private one is different from social one. It's possible that when a tariff increases domestic production, the benefit to domestic society will increase due to market failures. Okay, I'd like to explain figure 10.3 of slide number 20. We studied that, right? For example, like this. Supply, demand, world price, PW is like this. After imposition of tariff, domestic price goes up to PW plus tariff when imposing country is small country. Then we already studied that, right? Free trade. After imposition of tariff, domestic price goes up, right? And importation from world decreases from here to here. Right? And we calculate decreasing in consumer surplus is this one. Increasing inefficient produce surplus is this one. That is that way loss. So definitely change in national welfare is negative after imposition of tariff. Right? But sometimes, because anyway, inefficient production increase like this. Right? That is demand curve, right? Because of this demand curve, domestic production increase and domestic consumption can increase. This can increase some consumers' welfare like this, right? Then that is negative, but we didn't consider if market fails, that's everything. But market is not perfect. Market fails, then this kind of increasing consumers' benefit, which, how can I say, in this area C. This C is greater than decreasing this one plus this one when market fails. Okay? That is figure 10.3. If production of goods yields extra social benefit measured in panel B by area C, not captured as a produce surplus, a tariff can increase welfare. Okay? The domestic market failure argument against free trade is an example of a more general argument called theory of the second best. This argument is a special case. So special case of theory of second best. Theory of the second best. Right? That is a more generalization. Theory of the second best is a generalization of market failure argument. Right? Government intervention that distorts market incentives in one market may increase national welfare by offsetting the consequences of market failures elsewhere. Okay? If the best policy, fixing the market failures, is not feasible, then government intervene in another market, right? In another market, market A fails, right? Fixing market failure in market A is not feasible, then sometimes government intervene in market B using protectionist policy can lead to increasing national welfare. Okay? That is the second best way of fixing the problem. Economists supporting free trade counter-argue that, so counter-argument of this one, right? Counter-argument of this one is Economists supporting free trade counter-argue that domestic market failures should be corrected by a first best policy. First best policy, right? So, theory of the second best argument is market A fails, then government intervene in market B to increase national welfare. Okay? But first best policy story is market A fails, then government intervene, just market A directly. Okay? That is first best theory, right? First best policy. Domestic policy aimed directly at the source of the problem. If persistently higher underemployment of labor is a problem, then the cost of labor, wage rate, or production of labor-intensive products could be subsidized by the government. That is first best policy, right? This policy could avoid economic efficiency losses due to tariff. Okay? Unclear when and to what degree of market failure exists in the real world. Government policies to address market failures are likely to be manipulated by political powerful groups. That is true. Due to distorting the incentives of producers and consumers, trade policy is a second best policy, right? This may have unintended consequence that market situation worse, not better. Okay? So that the final point is really important. In microeconomic theory, you study the government failure. That is story of government failure. What is the meaning of government failures? Market fails, then government can enter the market to remedy that problem, right? But sometimes, usually, this kind of government intervention to remedy government failure resulted in more loss, more problem than market failure problem. That is government failure problem. Okay? Actually, we can see lots of examples of government failure, especially in developing countries. Right? So we can see lots of examples for government failures. Right? We can see some example even in Korea. Right? Government says something problem happened. Then government said we can remedy this kind of policy. But this government intervention caused more serious problem. Right? But yes, that is a problem. Okay, I'd like to stop here.